Yeah, and we know who that might be. Asmir, I know you know Eddie Howe really well. How do you think he is going to handle this situation?
Well, it's a very difficult situation. I think it's a situation probably that's a little bit above him in terms of the clubs and the valuations on players and contracts and who's been promised what. So there can be very difficult situations and positions a manager can find themselves in because it's not for them to control all of these things. He will want to keep Alexander Isak, who wouldn't. I think arguably the best striker in the Premier League. And he's going to communicate with him. He's going to look after him as well as he can. He also has to protect the squad. Obviously, he needs players who are all in, who are committed to the cause, not players who may be looking over their shoulders and looking for moves and maybe not being into their situation 100%. So it's a very, very difficult situation. But he's obviously very experienced now. How he's dealt with these things before, and I'm sure he's going to deal with it to the best of his abilities.
What do you think? 7:01 on September the 1st. Is he a Newcastle player or a Liverpool player?
I think he's a Newcastle player. I do feel like that, I think we talked about it a little bit off air. And I think because of all these other strikers going somewhere else, I don't think Newcastle have a replacement. And I think for them to go into such a big season, as we mentioned earlier, 4 competitions, Champions League nights at St. James's Park, to not have their number 9, I feel like it's going to be difficult for them to accept any sort of bid. I know Liverpool will be desperate for him, but I feel like he stays unless they find a replacement.
Newcastle fans loving you. Mark McAdam is here to cheer everybody up. Alexander Isak, what's going on?
AI. What's going to happen with this man? I don't even think AI can predict what the outcome of this situation is going to be. I think one thing we can say for certain is that every day that passes whilst Alexander Isak is still a Newcastle United player, regardless if he's training on his own or with the first team or whether he's in the squad or not, would mean that he is closer to staying at Newcastle United. Their stance has always been the same. He's not for sale. And if we were to sell him, we're looking for £150 million. And therefore, under those circumstances, it's a very difficult deal to make happen. And when Newcastle United also have the stance of, well, even if someone were to bid £150 million right now, we'd still only say yes on the proviso of us having a top-class Champions League ready striker in the building, signed up and ready to lead the line for us. So therefore, they were never going to sanction a sale unless they had someone in. We know that Benjamin Sesko was a player of interest. He was a player that potentially could fill that Alexander Isak void if he were to move on. However, he went to Manchester United. So Newcastle now back to the drawing board, looking at their options, reviewing the players that are available. But they will only sign someone who they feel is right for the football club, who is going to improve Newcastle United, who's going to be a player that can be developed by Eddie Howe, because that's the first thing he says. Any signing I make, can I improve them? Can I make them better? If the answer is no, he's not going to sign them. He has to sign players he wants to improve and that would fit into the way they play, the style and the philosophy of that football club, and could cope with playing at the very highest level. This is a side that wants to get to the Champions League again and want to win silverware again. So therefore, they need players that reflect that. So I'd say right now, it looks unlikely. But of course, there is still a long way to go, and we know that Liverpool are still interested in the player.
Exactly. And when we talk in the 7, we're going to talk about Newcastle's window. Is it actually as bad as everybody says? But in the meantime, Liverpool, Mark Gay, is it going to happen?
I would say, you put me round the spot with that question. I would say there's a possibility, but at the moment it feels unlikely. We know that they are in dialogue with Crystal Palace. We know that they like the player. We know that they are in the market to strengthen at centre-back. However, and we'll mention this in a little while, Giovanni Leone is coming in from Parma, so they have got one centre-back in. We know that Joe Gomez is coming back from injury as well. The key on this situation, Mike, is that Mark Gay has 1 year left on his current Crystal Palace contract. And Steve Parish has always said, we will only sell players for the price that we feel is acceptable, fair market value. We don't want to lose our captain as well, and he's not just a centre-back, he's a captain, he's a leader, he's a voice in the dressing room, he's the one that knits and gels everything together, so he's a key player to lose over the course of this summer. If the price was right, I'm pretty certain that Liverpool would say, yes, we want to sign Mark Gay. However, the price isn't right at the moment. Crystal Palace can demand whatever they want.
It was 70 million last season. It's now 40 million. It's like the price is right, surely.
The problem as well, and whilst you're right, yeah, the price has come down because he's got 1 year left on his current contract, but that is still a big chunk of money for a player who only has 1 year left on his contract. To just flip the question, Would Mark Gay want to go to Liverpool? Yes, absolutely. Premier League champions, no question about it. Massive development in his career, massive progression. However, is he going to get the game time that he needs in a year that's crucial for him being on the plane to Canada, Mexico and the US for the World Cup in 2026? He's probably looking at the Liverpool situation going, right, Virgil van Dijk, Ibrahima Konate, just signed a boy from Parma, Joe Gomez has been around it. I've got to force myself into that team. And if I can't force myself into that defence that's been exceptional, won the Premier League title last year, am I going to get the game time and the minutes that I need to be a shoo-in to play for Thomas Tuchel? So it's one of those things. I understand it to be a situation where Crystal Palace won't sell Eberechi Eze and Mark Gay in this summer's window. They don't want to lose both of them during the course of this summer. And my concern is that Crystal Palace are looking at this saying we need to be stronger, we don't want to be weaker. Is Spurs' need for Eze greater than Liverpool's need for Gay?
Has Arne Slot said anything about Gay today?
Well, Arne Slot was speaking to the media today. Of course, one of the questions he gets asked is what's happening, players in, players out, and all that sort of stuff. So it's always interesting to get his perspective. He's normally quite coy on these situations. Now, the Liverpool boss has refused to give his opinion on Mark Gay. That's following Crystal Palace's Community Shield win over Liverpool at the weekend.
The other end of the pitch, they have been linked with Alexander Isak, and Arne Slot told us today he wants at least one more forward.
It's clear that with Darwin gone and Luis Diaz gone, and even last season we had 5 or 6 options, I think. Again, Diogo, I need to mention him as well. So yeah, that we need to have one more attacker, at least.
Right, Mark, a lot of managerial moans there. Does that point towards a lot of business between now and the deadline?
Without question, there's still a long way to go in this window. 18 days, we're going to be talking about transfers. It amazes me. Premier League clubs, Mike, have spent over £2 billion and they're still not happy. Now, it's fascinating to see managers, and I think you'd probably get managers that will say, I'm always unhappy. I always want one more. I always want a little bit more money. I really need to add that little something extra to my squad. And that's just not possible, particularly in this summer's window where we know that clubs are coming up against a lot of problematic issues. First of all, prices. They're sky high, higher than you've ever seen them. You know, players going for 50 and 60 million every single week. That is common practice at the moment. Remember 5 years ago, that would have been for the elite players. Elite players now cost you over 100 million. Strikers, there's not many strikers available. They're going for between 70 and 80 million during this summer as well. And you've got clubs that are conscious about FFP and PSR, so they need to be a little bit careful. They need to make sure they sell players before they can buy players. So all of that in the mix is growing to frustration for so many managers. But still, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Over £2 billion spent already.
The youngster, where are they with this one?
Yeah, 18-year-old centre-back at Parma. On Wednesday evening, the two clubs agreed a deal worth £26 million. The player is currently in the UK at the moment. I think one of the key things as well was the player wanted to join the Premier League champions. Who wouldn't with the squad they've got at their disposal at the moment? He is going to be a part of the first team squad whilst he's only 18 years old. He is very much going to be a part of that team and that squad. One for the future without question. How much game time he'll get this season, but he's certainly in the thinking there of what Arne Slot wants to do. So yeah, that's the latest with Giovanni Leone. We're just waiting to see whether Liverpool like to maybe try and go back into the market and sign another possible centre-back.
Well, let's talk about the other centre-back then. Mark Gay. What about his situation, Asmir? Because what's he got, Mark? 1 year left on his contract?
1 year left on his Palace contract.
So what does he do? Does he go to the champions? Does he stay with Palace? Given that if he goes to Liverpool, he might not play all the time.
Again, I think if the option to go to Liverpool is there, the appeal of going to the champions and one of the biggest clubs in the world is incredibly difficult to pass down. And I know there's been talks of him moving on before. I think it's been an absolutely incredible servant to Crystal Palace. He's won him now 2 trophies. He's done incredible things there. So it seems like the natural progression for him in his career to go test himself at the elite level. So going into your last year of your deal, you would love more security. I'm sure in his life, he would like maybe a longer term contract, which Liverpool will provide him with that. So, and Crystal Palace probably need to sell and cash in. They're not a club, I think, or most clubs aren't in positions to be able to let players go on a free. So it seems like there is a deal to be done, and if Liverpool do get him, then look out.
Does it get done, Mark?
Asamir's made a really important point. Mark Gay wants to play, needs to play. You don't go from being a Crystal Palace captain, being the first name on the team sheet week in, week out, to being on the bench, even though it's a much bigger club and an opportunity to win silverware. But in 12 months' time, he would have been involved in the World Cup, and that's what he wants. So to be on the plane with Thomas Tuchel's squad and be a first name on the England team sheet, you have to have played. You have to have minutes under your belt. He goes to Liverpool. There may be a question mark. Does he get in ahead of Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk? Is he going to get the minutes? Is he going to play? And that will be his thought process ahead of making this move. The Crystal Palace stance is, we don't want to sell our captain on the cheap. We know that Newcastle tried to sign Mark Gay last summer. They got to around £65 million. Even that offer was rejected. It got close to what Parish wanted, but it wasn't close enough. We understand, again, the fee to get Mark Gay is substantial this summer. And will Liverpool pay it in its current guise? Probably not. Will there be a softening from Crystal Palace? Possibly. But my information is Steve Parish doesn't want to sell two key players this summer. Mark Gay being one, the other one, Eberechi Eze. And you have to look at that and say, whose need is more desperate? Spurs to get Eze in or Liverpool's to get Gay in? And I think that might answer the question.
Yeah, okay.